Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Jumah Nights, the Q&A series where we'll be discussing different questions that we've received from viewers on Instagram following the Jumah Nights series. Today we've got a really interesting question from a brother, Suhail Kareem, who's asked, Assalamu alaikum, who were the Thursday police of Imam Ali? And this is a really interesting question, one that I've done some extra research for because it's one that I feel should be discussed more in our communities, but as you will know, many people will have not even heard of this title before. So without further ado, inshallah, let's get straight into it. So the first thing to start with here is the concept of the Thursday police. You can see that the brother is referring to a specific section at the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen that was referred to as Shartat al-Khamis. And we want to start first of all with the definition of what this concept means. We start with the ayah of the Quran in Surah Tawbah, verse number 111. Allah says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُمْ بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ. He says, indeed Allah has bought from the believers their souls and their wealth, and in exchange for that He will give them paradise. يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَيَقْتُلُونَ وَيُقْتَلُونَ. He says that they fight in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they kill and they are killed in the way of Allah. وَعَدًا عَلَيْهِ حَقًّا فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ وَالْقُرْآنِ. He says that this is a true promise from Allah in the Torah, in the Injil and the Quran. وَمَنْ أَوْفَى بِأَحْدِهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ. And for the one who keeps his covenant with Allah, فَاسْتَبْشِرُوا بِبَيْئِكُمُ الَّذِي بَايَعْتُمْ بِهِ وَذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. Then he says, for that individual there's glad tidings for that which he has traded in, and that is the great victory. So what we can see in this verse is that there is a group of people from the believers who have made a covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see further explanations of this covenant, or the kind of covenant that is being made in this verse in the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. We see in Bahr al-Anwar in volume number 25, we have a hadith, or we have a saying from Ali ibn Hakam, where he mentions with regards to the Shartat here, because the Shart, it comes from the understanding that they have made a covenant or a pledge to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Ali ibn Hakam says, أصحاب أمير المؤمنين الذين قال لهم تشرطوا إنما أشارتكم على الجنة ولست أشارتكم على ذهب ولا فضة. He says that make your covenant or make your pledge. I only ask you to make this pledge in exchange for paradise, and I'm not asking you for a pledge in return for gold or silver. And then he makes the point here to say that this is a concept that has existed since the time of Rasulullah. This shart that these individuals, or this pledge that they make to Allah and to the Rasul and to Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, إِنَّ نَبِيَّنَا قَالْ لِأَصْحَابِهِ فِيمَا مَضَى تَشَرَّتُوا فَإِنِّي لَسْتُ أُشَارِتُكُمْ إِلَّا عَلَى الْجَنَّةِ. And he makes the same statement as Amir al-Mu'mineen here. He says, make your covenant, because in exchange for this, I'm not giving you anything apart from Jannah. And we see as a continuation of this riwayah, وقال أمير المؤمنين لعبد الله بن يحيى الحضرمي يوم الجمل أبشر يا ابن يحيى فإنك وأباك من شرطة الخميس حقا. He says, glad tidings to you, O son of Yahya, because you and your father are from Shartat al-Khamis. This is the first time we're coming across this title or this kind of group that is mentioned at the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, you are truly haqqan from Shartat al-Khamis. So there's something special here as well that you can see that he says haqqan. So there are individuals that are from Shartat al-Khamis, not haqqan. And that's a point that we're going to discuss obviously further into the episode. But just so that you can keep an eye on that part of the riwayah. So what we can see therefore is that Shartat al-Khamis, this is a group where there's a concept of somebody giving an oath towards Amir al-Mu'mineen, towards Rasulullah, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is reflected in the Quran and the hadith that we have just read. And this is reflected in a ceremonial oath. The same way that if you're about to join the army, for example, in the UK or in the USA, they would make you give an oath of allegiance. You swear by the country's law, or you swear by the Bible, or you swear by something in order to show your loyalty towards the country that you are fighting for, the army that you're joining. The same way here, there was a ceremonial oath that these individuals will take to join this group that is referred to as Shartat al-Khamis. And the narration goes on to say some of the names of the people who are part of Shartat al-Khamis. So it says, ثم ذكر البرقي. البرقي mentioned بعضهم بأسمائهم كسلمان والمقداد وأبو ذر وعمار وغيرهم. He says that these individuals were from Shartat al-Khamis, and these are the companions of the Prophet, Salman, Miqdad, Abu Dhar, Ammar, and others like them. So these individuals, they made a covenant, and they had a specific positioning, and this group known as Shartat al-Khamis. So that's what we've established so far, that there's a ceremonial oath, a covenant that they take, and this is an institution that started at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We find in some of the reports, like in the book of Shaykh al-Mufid in al-Ikhtisas, he mentions that there were 6,000 individuals that were recognized as being from Shurtat al-Khamis. So they were recognizable in society. If you were to be walking on the streets, for example, of Kufa at that time, you would be able to tell who is from the Shurtat al-Khamis and who isn't. So there are 6,000 individuals here that are part of this institution that started at the time of Rasulullah but became a actual kind of a well-known kind of institution during the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. I had a look at some of the books of the linguists in order to further understand the meaning of Shart al-Khamis that we are discussing today. Al-Fayruz Abadi says, "Ash-shart" means a contract or a condition, meaning to bind something and making it binding, right? And shurta with the dhamma, shurta, is something that is stipulated. So we can see here that this shart and shurta, because many of the times, if you would have looked at these discussions about Shart al-Khamis, you'll see that the scholars are using it in different linguistic forms. You'll hear some people say Shurtat al-Khamis. You'll hear another group of people say Shartat al-Khamis with a fatha. And others you'll hear them say Sharatat al-Khamis. So there's three kind of ways that some of the scholars say it. But we can see from the linguistics here that all three of the meanings are kind of encapsulated in the group that is Shartat al-Khamis. So you can see that the shart, which is binding, which is the covenant that they've taken, and the shurta, which is we're referring to the kind of some of the duties or the responsibilities that certain sections of this group would have. So we can see here that this recognition that they get as Shartat al-Khamis is from the term shart, which also stems from the word for sign or something defined. And all of the above connotations that we've discussed here, you can see it reflected in the hadith surrounding this group of individuals that I mentioned as Shartat al-Khamis. And you can see this understanding of the word shart in the Quran as well. We see in Surah Muhammad, in verse number 18, Allah says, فَهَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا السَّاءَةَ أَن تَأْتِيَهُمْ بَغْتَةً. He says, and are they waiting for the hour to come to them by surprise? فَقَدْ جَاءَ أَشْرَاطُهَا. He says, for the signs of it have already come. And he uses the word ashrat here. So we can see that that meaning is something that's Quranic with regards to the signs. So that is the meaning with regards to the shart, the covenant, the duties that they have in society, and this Quranic meaning that we have just encapsulated. A group that is distinguishable from the rest of society. As for Khamis, we can see in the question of the brother, he mentioned the Thursday police, right? And a lot of the writers these days, some of them, they may mention it as the Thursday police when translating it. However, al-Khamis here actually refers to an army, right? Or corps. We can see that the Khamis refers to an army because lexically, they would use this to represent the 5 parts of an army, which is, there's the rear guard, the front guard, the right and left flanks, and the qalb, the center of the army. So these are 5 sections, and therefore Khamis, which obviously comes from the word 5, khamsa, this is what refers to the army. So we can see Shartat al-Khamis is the individuals that have taken this covenant, and they are the vanguard of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the elite of the corps of Amir al-Mu'mineen, basically. And this is encapsulating the meaning of Shartat al-Khamis from a linguistic perspective. We can see that Ibn Manzur al-Ansari, he mentioned that there's a hadith where it mentions Muhammad and his Khamis, right? Muhammad and his army. So we can see that this is the understanding of why they were called Shartat al-Khamis. So we can understand therefore that the Khamis here that is speaking about the vanguard forces basically of Amir al-Mu'mineen. In today's language, you could say maybe the special forces, or when you're looking to do like something really, really difficult and you need your best men, your elite guard, these are the individuals that Amir al-Mu'mineen was looking towards. So that's what we understand from this understanding of Shartat al-Khamis. What does it mean linguistically, and what is the definition of it in the Quran and Hadith? Now we want to move on to the discussion of what were the functions and responsibility of this. Because at the moment in your mind, you might be thinking, yeah, it sounds like a military kind of group, people that go to fight, and that's like their main function. However, Shartat al-Khamis was actually much, much more than that. It's something that covered a lot of the different parts of society and a lot of the different parts of governmental rule. What is required for a society to run. We've seen a report of Da'im al-Islam, and this is with regards to the military kind of might of this group. Amir al-Mu'mineen is speaking about war, and he's describing battle. And he says, "Send forward the infantry and the archers, and let them shoot volleys of arrows." So this is like his kind of military strategy. This is how he wants to begin a war. Let the flanks engage in light skirmishing. Position the select tethered cavalry behind the banner and the vanguard as support. He's describing all the different kind of modes of battle, how they're going to strategize to win a battle. He goes on until he says at the end, and he's mentioned so many things here, and then he says, if it falters, if all of that fails, let it be reinforced by the Shurtat al-Khamis. So he's saying here, like, he's got a plan for war. He's got all of his soldiers going forward to follow a specific plan. Only in times of need, only when it comes to the point where you've got nothing else, basically, bring through the Shurtat al-Khamis. So you can understand here that they are basically the most elite of the warriors that exist, and the ones that Imam Ali relies on in the times of need. You'll see in the last few decades that when the American forces are in need, or there's something that really, really like needs to be achieved and things are not going right for them, it's the Navy SEALs or the Delta forces that basically come through and they kind of save the day. So Shurtat al-Khamis basically is that force for Amir al-Mu'mineen. But obviously we're speaking about Amir al-Mu'mineen here, so much greater than what you can think of like when you're talking about today's military forces. So we can see basically that there's a base army of Amir al-Mu'mineen and there's the elite, which is the Shurtat al-Khamis. We also see in another narration, in al-Kafi, we have another function of Shurtat al-Khamis. So we can see here that Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's making a judgment. We see Amir al-Mu'mineen says, فَقَالَ أمير المؤمنين والله لأحكمن فيهم بحكم ما حكم به خلق قبلي إلا داود النبي. He says that I'm going to make a judgment in this manner, in a manner which no one has done before me except for the Prophet Dawood. What he means here is that he's going to make a judgment because he already knows what has happened, basically. He already understands and he doesn't need to see the bayan, he doesn't need to see the proof for it. He already knows what's happened and he's made a judgment. And this is what they refer to as hukm al-Dawood. And we see this obviously with regards to the dhuhur of the Imam. But that's not our topic right now. He says, يا قنبر ادعوا لي شرطة الخميس فدعاهم فوكل بكل رجل minhum rajulan min ash-shurta. So we can see that these individuals, they were brought by the Shurtat al-Khamis. So the Shurtat al-Khamis, they acted as police as well, right? So they would do arrests, or they would bring individuals and keep them in confinement, or these kinds of roles in society, like the police of today. So they also cover that function in society. We also see another function of them in the marketplaces. We see a narration in Kamaluddin wa Tamam al-Ni'mah in volume number 2, page number 486 in the edition that I have. We have a narration from Hababa al-Walibiyah. She mentions رأيت أمير المؤمنين في شرطة الخميس ومعه درة يضرب بها بياء الجر والمارماهي والزمار والطافي. So she mentions that she saw Amir al-Mu'mineen with the Shurtat al-Khamis in the markets with the whips, and they were beating those individuals that were selling specific kinds of fish, al-jarri, wal-marmahi, wal-zamar, wal-tafi, right? We're speaking here about the catfish and other fishes without scales and things like that, the impermissibility of selling certain types of fish, which obviously is not our discussion. But we can see that Shurtat al-Khamis have this role to play basically in society with regards to things that are being sold. So even from an economic perspective, they're involved in society. So we can see from the reports of Shaykh al-Mufid and al-Ikhtisas, where he mentions that there are 6,000 individuals from them. You can see that their function can't be just in war, right? There has to be their functions in times of peace as well, because obviously war is not perpetual. It's not always in a state of war. So they were always involved in judiciary affairs, in socio-economic issues, in the markets, in the daily lives of individuals, and they were recognized as a group at the time. So even in the times of peace, these individuals were of great use to Amir al-Mu'mineen. We can also see some of the reports that mention the status of these individuals, right? There seems to be a special status that is given to them by Amir al-Mu'mineen and by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the kind of covenant that they've given and the way that they stick to this covenant. So as I mentioned earlier, Imam Ali alayhi salam says to the son of Yahya, he says, have glad tidings because you are from Shurtat al-Khamis haqqan. You're actually like you've followed the covenant and you've made sure that you stuck to the covenant. So you are truly from the Shartat al-Khamis. Here we see Amir al-Mu'mineen mentions إن قوم من قبلكم من بني إسرائيل تشارطوا بينهم فما مات أحد منهم حتى كان نبي قومه أو نبي قريته أو نبي نفسه. He says that there was some individuals that came before you, a group of individuals that came before you from Banu Israel that also made a pledge and a covenant. So none of them died except that they were a prophet of their people, a prophet for their town, or a prophet for themselves. وَإِنَّكُمْ لَبِمَنْزِلَتِهِمْ غَيْرَ أَنَّكُمْ لَسْتُمْ بِأَنْبِيَاء. He says, and you, speaking to Shurtat al-Khamis, are like them in their position, except that you are not prophets. So we can see here that there's a great status that is given to these individuals in Shurtat al-Khamis, that they are at the level of Anbiya. But of course, when we are speaking about 6,000 individuals, we can't say that all of them were at the status of the Anbiya. We know definitely that the individuals that stuck to their covenant, they stuck to their pledge in a true manner, that they were Shurtat al-Khamis haqqan, those individuals would have been at this status. We see individuals in the Shurtat al-Khamis who didn't hold up to this high standard that we see, for example, in this report. We see, for example, in this report in Bihar al-Anwar, where Ali ibn Abi Talib, he sends for an individual named Lubayd ibn Athrad al-Tamimi. And as he was being escorted, they passed by a gathering in which there was an individual called Na'im ibn Dajaja. And Na'im stood up and freed the man. So Amir al-Mu'mineen was told that Na'im did this action of releasing a man that wasn't supposed to be released. And Na'im was one of the Shurtat al-Khamis. So Amir al-Mu'mineen asks for Na'im to be brought to him, and he ordered that he be given a harsh beating. So this individual, Na'im ibn Dajaja, he released this individual because of tribal loyalties, and this is corruption. So Amir al-Mu'mineen asked for him to be punished. So we can see that not all the individuals in Shurtat al-Khamis were necessarily of that level that is being described when we see that he's mentioning them as being on the level of prophets. So this is an example of somebody that would have taken the ceremonial oath, but not kind of lived up to the oath that he made towards Amir al-Mu'mineen. The best thing about Shurtat al-Khamis and this concept is that it's one that actually permeates over timelines. It's not something that only remained at the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen or at the time of Rasulullah. Rather, it's something that we can actually be part of today. Because this is a theological concept in and of itself. These individuals, they were individuals that made an oath of allegiance to the Imam of their time. And they pledged their lives and their wealth and everything to the Imam of their time, which is something that we do today and we should do today. We should make that oath of allegiance to the Imam of our time so that we can be from the elites of the Imam of our time. We see, for example, in the hadith of the Imams ﷺ salam, the great importance of the service towards the Imam of our time. We see Imam al-Sadiq ﷺ salam say, he's asked about whether the Imam of our time, al-Qa'im, has been born yet. He says no. But he says, وَلَوْ أَدْرَكْتُهُ لَخَدَمْتُهُ أَيَّامَ حَيَاتِي. He says, if I was to see him, then I would have served him for every single day of my life. So this is the great service that we aspire towards. And this is the concept of Shurtat al-Khamis that we aspire towards, having that oath of allegiance and being in complete servitude and obedience to the Imam of our time, so we can achieve this level that we see in the narrations where the Imam's saying, you can be on the level of prophets if you are deep in obedience and deep in your oath and fulfilling of your oath towards the Imam of your time. We see this in a ziyarah of Imam Sahib al-Zaman, where it's mentioned that we send blessings upon not only the Imam but his supporters as well. We read, Allahumma salli ʿalayhi wa ala khuddamihi wa awanih, ala ghaybatihi wa na'yih. We say, oh Allah, send blessings upon him and his servants and his supporters in his occultation and his distance. So you can see that there are individuals that can reach this status during the ghaybah of the Imam of our time, where we are in his service and as his supporters. And you can see that these words are a direct manifestation of the words in Du'a al-Ahad, where we make this covenant, an oath towards the Imam of our time. And this cannot be described as anything other than the Shurtat al-Khamīs of the occultation, of the ghaybah. So this is something that we should all kind of aspire towards. Try and understand these individuals of Shurtat al-Khamīs. Those are the highest level. Try and understand what it was that made them individuals like that. Individuals like Salman, like Abu Dhar, like Miqdad. These individuals are personalities that we should study their personalities, what they gave in servitude to the Imam of their time, and inshallah look to embody that in our service to the Imam of our time. Inshallah, I hope that's been a informative episode and that we've understood what Shurtat al-Khamīs are and their functions in society and how we can actually aim and thrive to be among them in the time that we live in today. Inshallah, I'll see you next week where we'll be discussing a matter of taqleed. And we've got a great question from a sister on Instagram. Inshallah, I'll see you again for that next week. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.